In the hidden corners of human knowledge lies a secret so powerful that for centuries it has been guarded by initiates and seekers of the eternal. This secret is the golden key to limitless abundance, the mystery of magical wealth, the enigma of the oracle of gold. It is not merely material fortune nor fleeting desires. This wealth transcends the visible. It is the power to shape reality with the mind, to attract prosperity like a divine magnet, and to awaken within you the creative energy that transforms everything it touches. Inspired by the enigmatic and visionary wisdom of Aleister Crowley, this text will guide you through an initiatory journey where gold ceases to be just a metal and becomes a living symbol of will, power, and conscious creation. Each word is a spell, each idea a portal, each revelation a step toward mastering your own inner magic. Prepare to uncover the secrets of the Oracle of Gold, a mirror of destiny that reveals that true wealth is not conquered outside, but invoked from within. The call has been made and the magic begins now. Human existence is, by its secret nature, a predetermined orbit in the abysses of Nuib. Each being, cast into the world like a spark torn from the nucleus, traces its unique, unmistakable, inevitable trajectory. Perfection is not an abstract state nor a reward promised by foreign gods, but the culmination of that orbit in accordance with true will. All suffering, all straying, all misery arise from the friction with trajectories that are not our own. To live in order to please, to imitate, to obey external norms, is to defy the geometry of the spheres and to condemn oneself to perpetual erosion, to inner extinction, to the forgetfulness of the solar identity that has been granted to us. The man who does not know, who does not affirm, and who does not execute his will is but a shadow dragged by alien winds, a pale echo in the multitude of the unborn. This book, far from sentimental chatter and nebulous delirium, stands as a manual of discipline, the exact science of self-government, the art of decision, and the infallible record of error and correction. Here nothing is conceded to easy consolation or to abstract verbiage. Everything is subjected to the judgment of method, the objectivity of record, and the honesty of verified experience. It demands, therefore, the rigor of a mathematician and the sincerity of a penitent. Dogma is relegated to the weak, superstition to slaves. Here there is room only for the operator who longs, without fear and without reserve, for the truth of his own being. Even if that truth pulverizes the edifice of his education, his morality, and his inherited affections. The law. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It is not an excuse for whim, but the irrevocable command of the divine nature in every man and every woman. It will not deliver you from duty, but it will free you from the duty of another. To each one their star, to each star its orbit, to each orbit its glory. Work, study, love, money, art, health, and self-government are here laboratories of the great work, battlefields where the will is forged, tested, purified, and crowned. As a fundamental soul is assumed liberal beldages, scripture dictated in ecstasy, mirror of the law in its pure state. The operative framework is magic in theory and practice, an inexhaustible arsenal of techniques, formulas, and warnings for the contemporary magician. Decinox provides the method, the testimonies, the record of failures and victories, the logbook of those who advance and those who fall. The magical record is a daily tool, relentless, which unmasks self-deception and reveals genuine growth. Practical Cabala shall be the art of linking desire, energy, and form, transforming scattered life into structure, fleeting inspiration into enduring work. Nothing will be granted without labor. Nothing will be forbidden without reason. Everything must be tested, recorded, corrected, refined. The reader who dares to follow this discipline will not be comforted, but will be armed. Will not be protected, but will be emancipated. The crown is for those who persevere. Silence for those who turn back. So the law commands, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will, magical wealth. Based on the teachings of Aleister Crowley, we have noticed that more than 80% of those who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and giving a like to the video. Thank you for inspiring us to continue creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. Diagnosis of Will, Desire, Whim, and Star. The life of man resembles by inner necessity an astrological orbit. Every being gravitates according to the secret law of its nucleus and only finds perfection in the consummation of its nature. The instant in which gold separates from dross as it revolves according to the one legitimate law, its true will. The fundamental error of humanity lies in ignorance or in the betrayal of this will. And here is the root of all suffering, the cause of universal dissonance. He who fails to identify the exact pulse of his star condemns himself to straying, to an existence in which every act is friction, every thought a drift, every emotion a simulacrum. All conventional ethics, the entire edifice of borrowed duty, is but a prison forged in the wax of the spirit, a labyrinth where the will is consumed like poorly lit incense before dead idols. On the threshold of initiation, no dogma is more urgent to demolish than the superstition of desire as the way. Desire, in its vulgar sense, is a hybrid product, often bastardized by the impulses of the body, intoxicated by fashion, castrated by fear. The human animal, if it has not passed through the crucible of magical discipline, confuses hunger with purpose, social imitation with solar design, the spasm of lack with the command of the gods. Thus the law of Thelema, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," rises as the new Torah of Moses, but without the bondage of prohibition. There is no external mandate, but an inner revelation. Every man and every woman is a star, and the orbit of each star is unmistakable. Let us then examine the anatomy of desire, for in its dissection will emerge the first signs of true will. The root of desire sinks its fibers in need or in fear. Every authentic desire can be traced back to an essential lack, an insufficiency that is not mere whim, but a mandate of life. Yet most of the yearnings that torment civilized man are already dead branches, crimson shoots born of indoctrination, like ivy choking the oak of being. The trunk of desire is intention, the conscious orientation of impulse, the act of directing energy toward an object or end. Here manifests the magician's first capacity to discern between the intention that springs from his own center and that which has been implanted by another's opinion. The cup of desire is image and word, the way in which desire clothes itself in representations, dreams, projects, words that often betray it, for imagination is the battlefield between the will and the phantoms of inherited morality. The fruit at last is the act and its result. Here the tree is revealed by what it gives, not by what it promises. But how to distinguish in the tangle of impulses and appetites? What is the true seed of will? The answer cannot be sentimental, nor merely theoretical. One must apply the method that Master Therion consecrated in the Liber 2. The nature of man is unique and inviolable, and his will, though often ignored, can never be destroyed, neither by gods nor demons, but it must be known and obeyed. Failure in this leads to dissolution and misery. True will manifests through continuity without friction, through spontaneous increase of energy, through clarity and the absence of self-betrayal. Every act that produces fatigue, confusion, or regret is not will, but deviation. Whatever demands the constant repression of part of oneself or requires pleasing external expectations at the cost of one's personal joy is imposture and falsehood. Snares abound along the path. Borrowed morality imposed by priests, parents, legislators, and the wretched is the most perfidious enemy, for it adopts the mask of duty and of good. Guilt is its whip, inherited duty its bars, borrowed ambition its sweet poison. The initiate must learn to detect these simulacra through relentless observation of his inner movements, dissecting each desire until he finds its true matrix. Ask yourself, reader, which of your aspirations has persisted through the years, indifferent to fashion, to criticism, to ridicule, to labor? Which impulse has expanded without coercion, benefiting others without your having planned it for them? Which current of energy orders you in the musical sense, not the military one, gathers and elevates you, and which, on the contrary, disperses you and leaves you exhausted? These tests, coherence, personal joy, flow, constitute the first threshold of the gnosis of will. Yet romantic introspection is not enough. The method must be cold, almost surgical. The magical record, the diary of the work, is the only balance that does not lie. Write down every desire, note its motive, describe the act that arises from it and the internal and external effects it produces. Compare yourself across the different seasons of your life, and you will see the mutability of the accessory against the constancy of the essential. Use the correspondences of Liber 777 to detect the real affinities and the imagined ones, for true desire always finds resonance in some major arcana, in some path of the tree, in some planetary vibration. Falsehood, by contrast, generates discord and dissonance, like a base metal trying to pass for gold and revealed under the acid of experience. Here, reader, you must exercise with the severity of the alchemist and the lucidity of the mathematician. Make an inventory of your desires by areas: study, work, love, money, art, health, self-government, and subject them to the tests exposed. Reject without pity whatever does not withstand the proof of coherence and personal joy. If a desire changes with fashion, if it hides in shame, if it disguises itself as generosity to obtain gratitude, it is spurious. If instead it persists with silent firmness, if it radiates energy, if it allows you to act with freedom and without calculation, recognize in it the footprint of your star. Do not forget, however, that clarity may be the enemy of truth if confused with mental comfort. Will is often paradoxical. It demands the destruction of the false personality, the renunciation of social applause, the abandonment of borrowed duties. The true magician resembles Rahur Quit, assumes his solar throne, rejects hypocritical sacrifice, despises the morality of slaves, and submits only to the judgment of his own fiery core. The social ego must be sacrificed on the altar of divine individuality, for the law of Thelema is no excuse for whim, but a demand for authenticity. The radical difference between will and whim is revealed in time. Whim is fleeting, born of fear or imitation, and vanishes at the first obstacle. Will, by contrast, is inexorable as the orbit of the stars, capable of traversing the ages without losing force or purpose. The initiate must therefore cultivate detachment from immediate success and measure his acts by the inner vibration they leave, not by applause or reproach. Man has the right to love as he will, to live as he will, to die as he will, says the book of the law. But also there is no law beyond do what thou wilt. There is no room for self-deception. He who betrays himself, though he conquer empires, though he crown himself with laurels, is a slave. As a concrete exercise, take a notebook and create columns: desire, motive, act, effect. Record every significant impulse for 90 days. At the end of that period, review which desires have persisted, which have produced expansion, clarity, renewed energy, and which have plunged you into weariness, guilt, dispersion. Correct without pity, but without sentimentalism. The method is the same as that of the ancient hierophants. Nothing by faith, everything by experience. If you are honest, you will soon discover the subterranean symphony of your will. If you are cowardly, you will be lost in the jungle of others' desires, slave to images and words that are not yours. Thus, the diagnosis of will is the first sacrament of the new aeon. Only he who has known the anatomy of his desire may aspire to the government of himself and of his circumstances. The star is not a poetic symbol, but a mathematical axiom. Each one shines in exact proportion to his fidelity to his orbit. Those who deviate, who surrender to the laziness of the herd or to the frenzy of whim, will be dragged by the tide of centuries and forgotten like ashes. But he who discovers and executes his true will becomes an immortal star, reflection of Hadit in the circle of Nuit. Seek no consolation nor hope in foreign dogmas. Your only salvation is the rigorous science of yourself, the alchemy that transmutes desire into perfect action, the absolute obedience to the law of your star. If you doubt, consult Liber 2. If you stray, return to the record. If sloth overcomes you, remember that time is the only irretrievable good, the supreme sin, the only one that will not be forgiven, neither by gods nor by men, is restriction. To deny will, to disguise it, to betray it. Here then is the first and last word. Distinguish without pity will from whim. Dissect every desire until you find the solar seed. Reject the ballast of borrowed morality. Dedicate yourself to method, to record, to constant testing. Only thus, O initiate, will you make yourself worthy of the crown and the throne. Only thus will you know liberty, not license, but self-government. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Chapter 2. The Oath and the Record, Forging the Instrument. Every work that aspires to perfection, every magician who intends to raise the architecture of his destiny beyond chance and servitude, must grasp without hesitation the universal principle. Without oath, there is no work. Without record, there is no science. This is not a formula to lull the devotee to sleep, nor a decoration to embellish discipline with ritual appearances, but the very foundation of all effective action. The pillar where the will, freed from inertia and self-deception, condenses into a force capable of shaping the world. Just as the sun traces its orbit without error, just as the blood arrives punctually to the mysteries of the body, so too the initiate who dispenses with the oath is a living dead, a wanderer condemned to dispersion, his energy squandered in hollow promises, his days devoured by the mechanical repetition of vain impulses. The oath is the first forging of the human instrument, the deliberate act by which a frontier is drawn between the passive will, subjected to the capricious currents of desire, and the active will, armed with the steel of conscious intention. He who has never pronounced an oath before the gods or before himself still ignores the very nature of magical law. His life is like slime, fit for the generation of monstrous forms, yet incapable of sustaining the architecture of the temple. It is in the oath that the will is made flesh, where the word is incarnated, where the idea acquires contour, limit, and duration. An effective oath is not a vain declaration nor a pious aspiration. It must be specific, measurable, and temporal. I commit myself for 90 days to the practice of asana for 30 minutes at each dawn, and to record without omission the results. This precision is the armor that protects the magician from evasion and self-indulgence. It is the wall that separates the initiate from the profane, the architect from the phantom. But the forging of the oath requires in turn the adoption of an inflexible method of record. The magical record is not a sentimental diary nor a concession to self-complacency, but the ledger of the soul. In it every act is weighed, every omission is inscribed, every error becomes an opportunity for correction. Here there is no place for lies. Ink and paper are the impartial witnesses of the work, the mirror where naked truth is reflected. The method has been consecrated since immemorial times by the AA and is detailed in the Liber Exercitiorum. Each entry must contain the exact hour, the condition of the body, wakefulness, fatigue, illness, vigor, the dominant emotional state, the practices performed, the internal and external results, and any notable phenomenon, however trivial it may seem. Only thus may the practitioner discern the relation between cause and effect, between will and manifestation, between promise and fulfillment. The noble error, the deviation that is recorded and from which a law is extracted, is 1,000 times preferable to self-deception, to the silence of the coward who omits his defeat, who conceals with forgetfulness his weaknesses. He who lies in the record lies in his life. He who disguises his failure perpetuates ignorance. Just as the chemist notes the impurity of his reagents, so must the magician record his falls, his hesitations, his doubts. For magic is science, and it is art. Only the repetition of the experiment, only the honest confrontation with results, permits the refinement of the instrument and the ascent to higher degrees of mastery. Thus, the act of drafting the first quarterly oath must be, therefore, a major ceremony. It is not a bureaucratic triviality, but a rite of passage, the voluntary inscription in the book of those who have chosen to govern their destiny. The oath must be written by hand with consecrated ink, preferably red, to recall the blood of the will, in the presence of a burning candle and the personal symbols of the practitioner. The pen, instrument of the word that becomes law, must also be consecrated. Immerse it in salt water. Repeat over it the formula, by Hadit, by Nui, by Rahur Kuit. I seal this instrument that only truth be inscribed in my book. This ceremony links the diary to the star and the commitment to the invisible forces that govern the circle. Once installed, the record demands continuity and rigor. It is not enough to write when enthusiasm abounds. Science requires constancy, even in tedium and adversity. Each day at the same hour, the practitioner must open the book, note the state of the body, tense, relaxed, sore, euphoric, neutral, record the emotional climate, inscribe the practices performed. Asana, pranayama, meditation, minor or greater rituals. He must detail internal results, visions, sensations, resistances, and external ones, events, coincidences, alterations of the environment. Each week, a critical review of the entries will allow patterns to be detected, superstitions discarded, methods corrected. The function of the record is heightened if the practitioner incorporates the discipline of Liber 3 Vel Jugorum, the vigilance of word and thought. Note in the record every infraction. Each time a prescribed word escapes your lips, each time an undesirable thought crosses your mind, write down the hour and circumstance. This arduous and humiliating practice reveals the depth of conditioning, the tyranny of habit, the power of the unconscious. Only he who perseveres in this exercise gains the seed of true freedom, the capacity to choose moment after moment the direction of his energy. The record must not be anonymous. On the contrary, each significant entry is authenticated with the personal seal of the practitioner, a glyph designed ad hoc, inscribed at the foot of the page as testimony of the divine identity. This seal may be a Kabbalistic monogram, a Hebrew letter, an astrological symbol, whatever resonates with the secret nature of the operator. The act of sealing the record is in itself a micro-ritual. It affirms the magician's sovereignty over his acts, consecrates the memory of the work, and preserves it from forgetfulness and corruption. Yet it is not enough to record. One must know how to read the record, analyze its cycles, interpret its silences. The observation of errors reveals deep tendencies, exposes undeclared resistances, unmasks self-deceptions. Each page is a revelation. Days of high energy coincide with well-executed practices. Days of lethargy correspond to broken oaths, to falls into distraction, to concessions to sloth or whim. Little by little, the diary becomes an objective mirror, a cold and just oracle alien to excuses and self-indulgence. Thus is forged the instrument: disciplined will, tamed body, vigilant mind, governed word, faithful memory. To this process, which may seem arid to the profane, all genuine progress is owed. The great initiates, whether in the mysteries of Eleusis or in the pyramids of Chem, recorded each stage, each vision, each stumbling, for they knew that memory is fragile and imagination treacherous. Nothing that is not recorded survives time. Nothing that is not measured can be perfected. The oath and the record are the foundations upon which the inner temple is raised. Without them all, work is vain, every aspiration smoke, every achievement a mirage. Do not let sentimentalism dissuade you from precision. Do not allow fear of error to prevent you from recording defeat. Remember that the only unforgivable failure is deliberate forgetfulness, conscious omission, systematic lying to oneself. In the tribunal of magic, the only law is truth. What is not recorded does not exist. What is not measured cannot be transformed. What is not sworn is never accomplished. Forge your instrument, install your book, consecrate it. Seal each act with the sign of your star. Be relentless in method, but flexible in analysis. Correct without flagellation, persevere without childish illusions. Thus the initiate transforms himself from apprentice into architect of his own destiny. And his work, read years later, shall be the incorruptible testimony of a life governed by the law. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Chapter 3. Re-education of attention, the rhythm of the sun. The human soul, sunk in the stupor of habit and the slavery of noise, forgets again and again its solar lineage. By nature, every man and every woman is a king, a queen, a star, sovereign and arbiter of their own universe, capable of focusing their will in a luminous direction, of radiating consciousness like the disk of Ra that never sleeps. But the vulgarity of modern time, the parroting of the mind, the entanglement of servile tasks, the fragmentation of desire by the thousand little idols of the world, has undermined the dignity of attention, reducing it to beggary, scattering it like dust in the tempest. There is no greater defeat, no greater blasphemy against the law of Thelema than to allow attention to dissolve, to let the royalty of being be lost in distraction and automatism. Attention is therefore the perpetual tribute that the initiate pays to his own royalty. It is not the nervous vigilance of the bureaucrat, nor the tense concentration of the slave, but the sovereign exercise by which the mind, like a scepter, governs the movements of the body, of desire, of thought. This attention is neither free nor spontaneous. It demands training, taming, tempering in the fire of rhythm. Rhythm is the key. Just as the sun rises, culminates, declines, and dies each day without error, so must consciousness learn to synchronize with the great stations of the day, to create indestructible anchors that remind, with every step of the star, who is the true ruler within man. The technique transmitted in the Liber Res Belelios prescribes the installation of 4 solar anchors throughout the day: the greeting to the rising sun, Orient; the adoration of the sun at its zenith, Merides; the tribute to the setting sun, Occident; and the reverence to the midnight sun, Septentrion. Each of these stations is far more than a pious formality. It is the renewal of the pact between microcosm and macrocosm, the conscious reactivation of the axis of will, the heartbeat by which the initiate reintegrates into the order of the stars and banishes the tyranny of the accidental. Obedience to the sun, beacon, witness, and judge of the work, is the supreme metaphor of obedience to one's own will. He who kneels before the solar king does so in truth before his own center, before his own secret, before the immortal core of his being. The method requires discipline but not dogmatic rigidity. At dawn, before the world devours his energy with its petty affairs, the initiate pauses, breathes or not, and formulates his intention for the first quadrant. May this day begin in clarity. May my acts respond to the call of my star. May the energy of a deed awaken in every cell. The greeting may be accompanied by a gesture, hand over the heart, gaze toward the east, and by a phrase of power drawn from one's own liberal, I am the Lord of the strength of life. At noon, a pause to renew the pact, rhythmic breathing, brief solar invocation, reminder of the goal set at dawn. At sunset, evaluation, has attention been maintained or betrayed the will? Every drift, every dispersion is recorded, and the fire that sustained the day is thanked. At midnight, in solitude and silence, a micro-evaluation. Am I still the one who reigns? Or have I yielded the throne to automatons, inherited impulses, parasites of habit? To establish these rhythms, the initiate may rely on material aids, a metronome or bell to mark the precise hour of each station, a wall chart with the 4 cardinal points and their phrases of power, perhaps drawn from the solar hymns of Egypt. Even a talisman carried throughout the day as a physical reminder. Every instrument is valid if it strengthens consciousness and discipline, if it helps break the spell of dispersion. The recording of lapses, brief notes in the diary each time the mind wanders, each time attention is lost, becomes the logbook of the reconquest of the kingdom. It is not a matter of self-flagellation for distraction, but of identifying the enemies of will, of understanding the patterns that divert attention, of designing strategies to correct them. The rhythmic breathing taught in the Liber Exercitiorum accompanies each adoration. The initiate learns to inhale, retain, exhale, and hold the void in equal cycles, synchronizing the mind with the pulse of the universe. Thus, each time the sun is invoked, body and consciousness enter a state of majestic alertness. The act is engraved in deep memory, and inner royalty is reinforced. Soon the magician discovers that attention is no longer an effort, but a natural condition, an unbreakable habit like the turning of the spheres. Obedience to the sun is not servitude, but sovereignty. The initiate imitates the star not out of superstitious devotion, but to remember at every turn that the law of life is rhythm, that true freedom consists in dancing without error to the cadence of will. The chaos of the ordinary man, his fatigue and alienation, come from having lost his axis, from living like a wandering planet without center or orbit. Only he who establishes these solar anchors recovers fullness and constant energy, self-remembrance, the capacity to govern his inner kingdom without fear or remorse. The record, which must contain in each quadrant the note on the quality of attention, the deviations detected, and the corrections applied, allows the initiate to chart the progress of his re-education. He will soon see that rhythmic days produce clarity, serenity, and a strange causeless joy, while chaotic days generate fatigue, dispersion, self-contempt. Thus he learns, not by dogma but by experience, that attention is the alchemical gold of consciousness, the very substance of power. This practice, humble in appearance, is the foundation of all higher magic. Without mastery of attention, all rituals are theatre. Without solar rhythm, all knowledge is scattered, all work sterile. The initiate who conquers attention, who establishes his reign in time and space, becomes a living reflection of Ra or Kuit, a being who acts, thinks, and desires as a king, not as a slave, who governs his days as a god governs his worlds. Remember then, attention is your scepter, rhythm your shield, the sun your mirror and your witness. Honor each station with the tribute of your presence. Record each deviation. Correct each error with the serenity of the alchemist. Thus, day by day, you will recover the lost royalty. You will rewrite the law upon the living tablets of your flesh, and your life will be the temple where the sun never sets. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Chapter 4. Cleansing and marking of space, the pentagram of the task. The aspirant cannot raise a cathedral upon a swamp, nor erect a temple upon foundations corroded by rot and neglect. Every magical work, every enterprise that claims to serve the authentic will, must, as an immutable condition, establish order first within its own domain, expelling the superfluous, arranging the useful, and fixing clear boundaries between the consecrated and the profane. This cleansing, which to the ignorant appears as mere whimsy of devotees, is in truth the secret law by which every cosmos separates itself from chaos. Every true act derives its force and justification from it. Without this labor of exclusion and limitation, energy leaks through 1,000 fissures, thought becomes poisoned with alien images, desire is prostituted in the service of usurping forces. No man can serve two masters, says the Bulgar text. Indeed, he who has not established the perimeter of his kingdom cannot govern himself, nor the powers he invokes. The function of the vanisin, the magical banishing, goes far beyond the superstition of merely cleansing the environment of negative influences. Its profound objective is to institute an act of authority, to affirm that the operator is the sole legislator in his space, that no force, visible or invisible, may act without his explicit consent. The pentagram, in its operative aspect, is far more than a symbolic sigil. It is an ethical machine, a mechanism of government whose daily execution establishes, purifies and sustains the cosmic order in miniature. To trace the pentagram is, above all, to assume the crown, to declare before the powers of air, fire, water and earth that legitimate will has arrived, that every element must return to its appointed station, that no obsession, parasite or alien desire shall pass the threshold unbidden. It is not a battle against external demons, but the proclamation of inner sovereignty, the delimitation of the circle where only personal law reigns. The difference between expelling obsessions and assuming authority is subtle, yet absolute. The superstitious devotee obsesses over the expulsion of imagined presences, thus eternalizing his role as victim, feeding the myth that his power depends on external circumstances. The true magician, by contrast, does not fear the forces he banishes, for he knows they exist only insofar as he grants them hospitality. The vanisin is then the ritual declaration that whatever does not serve the will shall be returned to primordial chaos, and only the useful and the harmonious may dwell within the circle of the work. Thus, the pentagram becomes the threshold between man and the universe, between the self and the multitude, between creation and dissolution. The daily practice of opening and closing the day with precise rituals is the operational axis of this chapter. Upon waking, before the residues of dream and the expectations of others cloud the mind, the initiate performs the banishing, standing at the center of the chosen space. He traces the pentagrams with his hand or consecrated weapon in the 4 cardinal directions, vibrating the secret formulas prescribed by tradition. The star ruby, the thelemic and radical form of the ritual, supplants the variants ossified by centuries of mechanical repetition. Every stroke is a sword, every vibration is a command cutting through the veils of matter and desire. Here there is no place for automatism. Visualization must be sharp, intention unbending, imagination a pure channel through which only the forms consecrated by the will may flow. At the close of day, the same ritual seals the space, dissolving residues, cutting ties with whatever has been provisionally admitted, reaffirming that the magician's domain remains untouched by the storms of daily life. Before any significant decision, the square breathing is practiced. Inhalation, retention, exhalation, retention in equal cycles, purifying the mind and stabilizing emotion. This exercise, described in the Libero, is not mere gymnastics of the air, but the method by which vital energy is aligned, thought fixed, and image purified before action. No magician, no priestess should ever decide, nor even think of deciding, without first stabilizing the air of their inner kingdom. Thus the infiltrations of caprice, the pressures of environment, the whispers of ancestral phantoms are prevented. Decision then emerges not from urgency or fear, but from the legitimate authority that springs from the solar center of the being. The establishment of a working circle within the home, whether a room, a desk, or even a simple consecrated mat, is the foundational act of all enduring work. This circle is not limitation, but sanctuary, the place where all that occurs is governed by personal law. At its edge, the initiate may place symbols of the elements, a candle for fire, a cup for water, salt for earth, incense for air. No object, no sound, no presence is admitted without evaluation. Every inclusion is identified, recorded, and if deemed alien to the will, expelled with the corresponding banishing. The use of tracing schemes and vibrations drawn from the star ruby and the signs described in the Libero allows the operator not only to execute the ritual with precision, but also to understand its inner logic. Each cardinal direction corresponds to an element, each sign to a phase of the work, each vibration to a planetary or zodiacal force. Far from being an empty choreography, the ritual becomes an act of government. The magician governs his elements, his thoughts, his emotions, as a king governs his ministers and armies. The personal table of interruptions and responses, an indispensable tool, must be reviewed and refined frequently. In it are noted all intrusions that disturb the work, noises, visits, intrusive thoughts, physical sensations. For each interruption, a ritual response is prescribed. Repeat a trace, recite a brief formula, return to the circle's center. Thus, the psyche and the environment are trained to respect sacred boundaries. Invisible intruders are deterred, and inner dominion reinforced. Over time, the very space learns who rules, and disturbances diminish to their minimum expression, for no force persists where it finds no welcome. This chapter is therefore a treatise of subtle architecture. It teaches how to build the temple where the will may act unadulterated, how to cleanse the residues of profane life, how to install mechanisms of defense and governance that enable the greater work. No advance is possible while the magician tolerates disorder, confusion, or intrusion of alien forces. The pentagram of the task, executed with rigor and consciousness, is the key to inner freedom, the ethical machine that upholds the edifice of the law. Nothing is trivial. Nothing is accessory in the cleansing and marking of space. The energy released in this act is the same that later will be invoked in the greater rituals, the energy that will permit the descent of light, that will sustain the coherence of the work through days and nights. One cannot build a cathedral upon a swamp. Repeat it each morning and each night, and make your space the perfect reflection of your star. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Chapter 5. The Architecture of Desire, Cabala for Decision. The initiate cannot surrender to chance or imprecision in the enterprise of the will. He must, on the contrary, learn to articulate desire as the architect who raises the temple upon exact mathematical plans and precise materials. Thus, the Cabala, far from being a game for scholars or a storehouse of medieval superstitions, is the profound mathematics of the soul, the art by which each impulse is ordered, purified, and directed from the primordial chaos of Kether to the tangible concretion of Malkuth. In the tree of life, no symbol is arbitrary, nor is any path without inner justification. Every human experience can and must be mapped upon this scheme, for only thus does energy find its channel. Only thus does desire cease to be whim and become a masterpiece. The first task, then, is the rigorous selection of the objective. A vague impulse or faceless ambition will not suffice. The desire must be dissected down to its essence, purged of all foreign influence, stripped of ornaments and disguises. The magician interrogates his desire with the severity of a judge and the coldness of a geometer. Is this truly mine, or has it been imposed upon me? Is it the desire of flesh, of ego, of fear, or does it respond to the deep vibration of my star? Only when the desire has survived the crucible, when it remains intact despite doubt and introspection, may it be projected upon the tree of life. The next act is the assignment of the dominant sephira. To which sphere does the desire correspond? Is it an impulse of knowledge, Hod, of love, Netzach, of power, Gebura, of harmony, Tifereth, of matter, Malkuth, of spiritual expansion, Kether? Each sephira is an autonomous world with its own laws, virtues, and perils. To assign the desire to its precise sephira is, in truth, to define its ontological purpose. It is not the same to desire out of lust for domination, as it is out of aspiration toward beauty. The quest for wealth is not the same as the quest for wisdom. The magician must study Liber 777 and the plates of the tree with philological attention in order to discern the exact correspondences. To every sephira correspond a planet, a color, a metal, a psalm, a divine name, a path, an arcana of the tarot. This network is no ornament. It is the hidden structure that sustains the work and gives it force of execution. Once the sephira has been identified, the operator determines the operative path, that is, the route by which the energy will descend or ascend upon the tree. This is a work that requires crossing the path of Daleth, air, thought, beginning, or the path of Teth, love, union, beauty. Each of the 22 paths is an inner journey, an act of transmutation that must be represented and executed with ritual precision. The most common error is to approach the objective without identifying the auxiliary forces and probable resistances. The Cabala teaches that no sephira operates in isolation. Every desire summons allies and adversaries within the structure of the soul. If the objective is material, its support in Yesod must be examined. If spiritual, its root in Binah or Chokmah cannot be neglected. To map the objective upon the tree is therefore to analyze its flows and obstructions, to predict crises and triumphs, to foresee trials and aids. To convert confused desire into a project with name, number, and symbol is an act of magical creation. The name fixes the form. My work shall be the writing of a book on solar discipline, and not merely I wish to write more. The number, determined Kabbalistically, grants vibration and resonance. The magician calculates the gematria of the project's name, identifies its affinity with hidden words, extracts lessons from secret correspondences. The symbol, designed according to the chosen sephira and path, is the anchor that gathers dispersed energies. It may be a sigil, a glyph, a physical talisman crafted with the appropriate materials and colors. The concrete practice begins with the drafting of the objective, formulated in precise and measurable terms. The magician consults Liber 777 to choose the associated planet, selects the proper metal and ink. If the work pertains to Hod, he will use mercury. If to Netzach, copper. If to Gebura, iron. He draws the symbol upon parchment, consecrates it according to traditional formula, appropriate incense, invocation of the divine name, recitation of psalms attuned to the chosen vibration, and places it at the center of his working circle. The plan of action is subdivided into 22 microacts, one for each path of the tree. Each day, each week, the magician performs a specific action symbolizing the advance along a given path: a day of fasting, a meditation upon the corresponding arcana, a reading, a visit, a prayer, a manual work. Thus, the desire is fragmented into manageable stages, embodied in defined acts, removed from abstraction, and transformed into an irreversible process. The sum of the 22 acts constitutes the secret ladder, the trajectory of the lightning flash from Kether to Malkuth, the methodical incarnation of the will in the physical world. The design of the talisman crowns the process. It is no amulet for the superstitious, no fetish of ignorance. It is the node where name, number, matter, and color converge, the physical witness of the pact between operator and the force invoked. The talisman may be forged in metal, painted on cloth, inscribed on parchment. It must bear the Kabbalistic vibration, the word of power, the planetary color, the image of the arcana. Consecrated in private ceremony, charged with the magician's breath and concentration, it shall be carried or placed in the circle until the objective is fulfilled. At every stage, record-keeping is indispensable. Each microact, each difficulty, each synchronicity must be noted. Psalms or invocations aligned with the tone of the chosen sephira are recited to harmonize the work with the higher purpose. Thus Cabala ceases to be abstraction and becomes operative technique, the secret mathematics by which desire is transmuted into reality, the invisible architecture sustaining all true success. The initiate who masters this art no longer fears error or failure, for he knows that every resistance has been foreseen, every crisis is part of the design, every result the record of the profound equation between man and the universal forces. Cabala, in its highest sense, is the law of balance and correspondence. What is born in Kether is realized in Malkuth. What is conceived at the summit descends inevitably to the base. He who knows how to map, to calculate, to consecrate, and to execute with method shall be the architect of his own destiny. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Chapter 6. Yoga of the will, posture, breath, and gaze. The man who aspires to elevate his will to the rank of operative power, capable of shaping destiny and summoning forces without vanishing in the first wind of fatality, must first conquer his own body. This temple of alchemy where flesh, breath, and thought may become either a beast of burden or the chariot of the gods. To attempt to govern the cosmos without having raised the scepter over oneself is absurd. Will without mastery of the body as a ship without a keel, a soldier without armor, word without flesh. Here lies the secret that for centuries has been veiled under jargon and exoticism. Yoga, far from being an end, is the ensemble of royal arts by which the operator tames the human machine, annulling the tyranny of nervous twitch, silencing the tempest of wandering thoughts, and at last establishing the empire of the will over all the inner kingdoms. The discipline begins with asana, immobility without pain. One chooses a posture that allows the spine to remain erect, and the body relaxed, yet inflexible as the law of Mat. The choice is not capricious. It must be sustained without adjustment for increasingly longer periods, until the body becomes a statue, the muscle forgets spasm, the skin loses its instinct to flee. During the first week, the adept always sits in the same place and at the same hour, upon a consecrated mat, with a candle at eye level and a silent clock. He must neither seek perpetual comfort nor force perfection from the first attempt. The method is gradual advance, the patience of stone that receives the chisel 1,000 times before revealing the statue. Pain must be distinguished from discomfort. The first is warning. The second, resistance of habit. Here the practitioner begins to learn the difference between necessary suffering and useless self-torture, a law crucial for all further progress. Simultaneously is introduced pranayama, the government of the wind. Air is not mere matter, it is the vehicle of prana, vital substance, breath of the gods, soul of the magician. The technique, described with precision in the Liber and masterfully expounded in the 8 lectures on yoga, consists in establishing regular cycles of inhalation, retention, exhalation, and void, always in exact count, with the mind absorbed in the rhythm. At first, the adept counts to 4 in each phase. Then he gradually increases the retentions, always attentive to the body's signal. When the mind is agitated or anxiety threatens, the cycle is reduced, but regularity is never abandoned. The breath becomes a pendulum, consciousness a witness, will an inviolable metronome. Soon the breath quiets, and thought, forced to follow the rhythm, yields ground to golden silence, the prelude to higher states. The third pillar is dharana, driving the mind like a stake, fixing it on a single point, the flame of the candle, a glyph, a sound, a word of power, until the entire universe disappears and only remains the unity of subject, object, and act of observing. Here fails the sentimentalism of the neophyte, who mistakes concentration for rigidity or scattered attention for freedom. Dharana demands rigor of iron and flexibility of gold. When the mind flees, it is recalled. When fatigue attacks, one rests. When boredom threatens, the motto is recited. The supreme sin is restriction. The operator learns that there is no greater magic than the capacity to sustain gaze, gesture, and breath in perfect synchrony, without fluctuation, without betrayal, without self-indulgence. The body becomes shield, the mind spear, the breath secret river that erodes the stones of habit, until only the bed of pure consciousness remains. The 12-week program is the laboratory of the adept. In the first week, the asana is chosen and consecrated, practiced for periods of 10 to 15 minutes, always increasing by 3-day intervals. In the second and third weeks, pranayama is added, beginning with short cycles and lengthening only when the body allows without violence. From the fourth week, dharana is introduced, first with external objects, then with internal words, until attention is able to resist the temptation of intrusive thought. Progress is not measured in visions or pleasant sensations, but in the disappearance of automatic gestures, in the serenity of the body, in the elasticity of breath, in the stillness of the mind. The signs of progress are unequivocal. Posture is held without pain, breath settles like water at dawn, the mind ceases to leap like a drunken monkey and becomes a mirror where a datum contemplates itself. The body once rebellious obeys, energy once scattered concentrates. Visions appear, subtle movements of energy, states of causeless bliss, but the magician clings not to them. He records them and lets them pass, knowing every phenomenon is accessory, and that the goal is mastery, not experience. The signs of excess, by contrast, are clear and dangerous. Persistent pain, anxiety, insomnia, irritability, obsession with achievement. In such cases, the wise withdraw, rest, review the formula of preparation. Bath, salt, silence, never violence, never haste, never the arrogance of impatience. Each session is preceded by ritual preparation. Bath purifies, salt protects, silence consecrates. The mat marks sacred space, the candle symbolizes attention. The clock measures cycles and allows progress to be gauged with scientific precision. The adept records each session in his diary, noting duration, difficulties, improvements, inner states. At the end of each week, he reviews the journal and adjusts the program according to obtained data, never by whim or frustration. Yoga of the will, thus conceived, is not a series of physical exercises nor mental gymnastics, but the construction of the inner temple where the magician becomes priest, altar, and sacrifice. There is no outer mastery without inner mastery. There is no true magic without control of gesture, of breath, of gaze. The initiate who perseveres, who corrects without self-flagellation and advances without haste, discovers at last that the body obeys, that the air nourishes, that the mind serves. Then his will is law, and his law is freedom. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Chapter 7, Oracles and the Governance of Choice, Tarot and Drawing Lots. Nothing is more fatal to the dignity of man than the abdication of his will before oracles, for divinatory arts, when misunderstood, are essentially the consecration of cowardice, the delegation of responsibility to imaginary powers or external forces. The tarot, in its degenerate use, becomes a crutch for the indecisive, a refuge for the pusillanimous who fear to err, and thus never truly live. But in the thelemic discipline, cartomancy is not an oracle of servitude, but a mirror of governance, a tool of self-diagnosis, a compass for navigating the currents of vital energy, a mechanism to contrast the hypothesis of the will with the invisible tides surrounding it. The correct method begins with the purging of all abject questions. One does not consult the tarot to find out what will happen, as a fearful servant would, but to interrogate the universe on how to govern the influence of the forces at play. The right question is always active. How will I govern this influx? Which energies must I mobilize to ensure that my decision honors my star? Which internal or external resistances must I anticipate? Thus the deck ceases to be an oracle of fatality and becomes an instrument of self-governance, an ally of consciousness, a mirror in which the image of the will is refined and corrected. Short spreads, far from the charlatanry of endless deployment and verbose flourishes, are precise and functional. The first is the binary spread, useful when two paths present themselves and uncertainty threatens to paralyze action. Two cards are drawn, one for each option. Their arcana are analyzed in light of the Book of Toti and their planetary correspondences, Hebrew letters and metals. The result is not a verdict, but a diagnosis. Which dynamic favors the expansion of the will? Which scenario carries the greater risk of betraying one's star? If the choice aligns with the solar card, a harmonious flow is anticipated. If it conflicts with the arcana of restriction, the operator must prepare to confront and transform the obstacle, not necessarily to avoid it. The second spread is the risk map. 3 cards are laid out to identify, respectively, allied forces, probable resistances, and hidden factors. This operation, rooted in Kabbalistic structure and based on the elemental triangle, allows the magician to visualize the battleground before acting, anticipating possible deviations, internal betrayals, accidents, and synchronicities. Each element is associated with a concrete action recorded in the diary. If the tower appears, for example, disaster is not feared. Instead, one prepares the controlled demolition of the obsolete. The third spread, the 7-day plan, involves placing 1 card for each upcoming day, creating a map of the energetic climate. It is not a matter of surrendering to the winds, but adjusting the sails. If the day predicts restriction, the magician doubles vigilance. If it promises expansion, decisive acts are scheduled. The secret lies in integrating predictions with vital strategy, never in passive submission to prophecy. The record is absolute law. Each spread must be noted in the diary, documenting the question, the context, the drawn cards, the interpretation, and the actions derived. At the week's end, the operator reviews the facts and verifies the accuracy of the oracle, adjusting method and interpretation. This cycle of hypothesis and verification, both scientific and magical, destroys superstition and grants the tarot the dignity of an evolutionary instrument, free from self-deception and idle fantasy. No less useful are auxiliary draws, dice, coins, mechanisms of controlled chance, employed not as dictators of destiny, but as decision triggers when a fine-tuned will faces equivalent alternatives. Properly ritualized, preceded by invocation or mantra, the draw synthesizes surrender and governance. Do what thou wilt also implies knowing when to delegate the outcome of cosmic laws once all conscious work has been performed. Integration with the diary is key. Every relevant decision accompanied by its oracle must be recorded in the magical register, not to feed retrospective vanity, but to cultivate honesty and learning. In this way, the magician refines his art, learns from successes and errors, discerns patterns in his questions, and observes the evolution of his consciousness over time. The tarot ceases to be a tool of evasion and becomes a lever of transformation, carving the will into the marble of the days. The Book of Toti is the ultimate exegesis, an inexhaustible source of correspondences, nuances, and operative keys. Each arcana is studied in its context: planet, letter, metal, color, animal, verb. No interpretation is improvised. The magician refers to the table of correspondences to reinforce the reading with concrete actions. If the card is Venus, he employs copper or green in ritual. If Mars, iron or red. If Sun, gold and yellow. Magic is not superstition but scientific art, in which every result is translated into act. Here lies the difference between the slave and the king. One asks to fear, the other asks to govern. The tarot, far from a fetish, is the mirror where the star contemplates its destiny and cultivates it, where the operator finds guidance but never excuse. Consult, record, verify, and act accordingly. Thus divination becomes governance and chance becomes law. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Chapter 8. The power of the word and the seal, sigils, names and talismans. There is no act more transcendent in the magical work than the fixing of the word and the consecration of the seal. For everything that exists in the manifested universe was first a word, a sign, a vibration. The name, in its highest sense, is the matrix of form. A word spoken from the core of the will is the architect of destiny, the cornerstone upon which worlds are built and dissolved. Just as in the Egyptian mysteries, the god arose from the abyss when pronouncing his name over the chaos of none, so the magician creates, delimits and consecrates the sphere of his option, naming with surgical precision the object of his desire. Nothing vague, nothing diffuse. The name is both word and sword, and its purity determines the strength of the seal. The distillation of intention begins with the relentless purification of the motive. All residue of foreign desire, all trace of sentimentality, all shadow of borrowed ambition is eliminated. The intention is reduced to its essence, formulated into an operative, active, unequivocal verb. I do not want to be happy, the book inscribes. I govern my energy. I consecrate my home. I restore my body. The verb is the trigger of energy, the lightning that opens the channel from potential to real. No spirit responds to vague prayers or ambiguous commands. The universe bows only to the order that does not falter, to the words sealed by the conviction of the star. The design of the sigil is the graphic alchemy of this intention. Vowels and repeated letters are removed from the phrase of will. The strokes are recombined until a glyph emerges that, by its strangeness and separation from ordinary memory, channels energy along a virgin path, free from mechanical associations. This process, described in Magic in Theory and Practice, transforms conscious desire into unconscious form, concealing the intention beneath a veil of abstraction, so that the deep psyche, not the hesitant ego, assumes command of the operation. Once traced, the sigil is drawn with suitable ink on paper, metal, or cloth, according to the nature of the objective and the Kabbalistic correspondence of Liber 777. Materials are never arbitrary. If the work is protective, lead or iron is chosen. If creative, copper or mercury. If for wealth, gold or yellow. Ethics is iron law. Never should a sigil, talisman or word be forged against the freedom of others. A will that begs or seeks to dominate another is perverted, a seed of slavery and misery. Legitimate magic is autarky. The operator works only within the circle of his own star. He never invades, never corrupts, never seeks permission or begs approval. The magician is neither beggar nor tyrant, but sovereign, governing his kingdom, not that of others. Any operation attempting to subjugate, seduce, or manipulate another being without consent is a betrayal of the law, punished by the dissolution of one's own will, an inevitable shipwreck in the seas of another's karma. The cycle of charging and forgetting is the operative formula. Once consecrated, the sigil is charged through anointment with prepared oil, fumigation with incense, recitation of the name, and vibration of the intention. Brought to a state of exaltation, full concentration, intense visualization, projection of desire onto the glyph until the energy feels real, tangible, almost corporeal. This is not hysterical ecstasy nor fantasy, but the sustained focus of the mind drilling into matter and transforming it. After charging, the sigil is forgotten, stored in a protective box, burned, buried, or dispersed according to tradition and objective. Forgetting is crucial. It frees the psyche from anxiety, breaks the vicious circle of expectation, and allows the energy to release without interference from the ego. Weeks or months later, the operator verifies the effects without forcing results or seeking immediate proof. Authentic work is recognized by its fruits, not by spectacle. The construction of the talisman follows the same logic, but amplifies formality and potency. The talisman is the vessel of the will, the material witness of the alliance between man and the universal forces. The material, metal, paper, cloth, stone, is chosen according to the correspondence of the planet or sephira associated with the objective. The sigil, name, and word of power are inscribed and decorated with colors, numbers, and Kabbalistic symbols that reinforce resonance. Preservation is a major rite. A clean circle, appropriate invocation, anointment with consecrated oil, sprinkling with lustral water, passage through incense smoke, vibration of divine names, and final fixation of the purpose. Let this talisman be the channel and guardian of my will in the work I declare. The schedule of use is precise. The planetary day and hour for activation are determined. Presence in the circle or carrying upon the body is planned according to the phases of the work. The tool is not abused. The talisman is used, discharged, and stored. It is never reduced to a superstition or fetish. When the work is complete, the talisman is neutralized, its energy released, its service thanked, and its elements dissolved. This prevents accumulation of psychic residue and preserves magical hygiene, a law that laziness and attachment profane, and by which many have fallen into paranoia and obsession. All materials, oil, incense, storage box, are chosen methodically, nothing improvised, nothing purchased casually, all conserved and prepared with the rigor appropriate to a royal operation. The memory of the work is recorded in the diary. Design, charging, sensations, signs of fulfillment or resistance. In this way, magic ceases to be fanciful art and becomes the engineering of destiny, the science of freedom and form, the the governance of forces without violence or begging. The power of the word and the seal is the heritage of kings and gods. Whoever masters it shapes the world according to the law of their star. Whoever ignores it remains a slave to the names and seals of others, repeating formulas without understanding, chained to talismans, hollow words and worn phrases. Choose, therefore, purity and rigor. Name, follow, and consecrate only that which responds to your will. Leave the rest to silence and the dust of time. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Chapter 9. Fire of the body, sexuality, energy, and silence. In the forge of the magician, sexual energy occupies the supreme place as universal fuel, the living sulfur of the great work, root and apex of all mysteries, an inexhaustible source of power which, if misunderstood or misdirected, degenerates into a parody of pleasure or an abyss of repression. The body, that laboratory of gods and demons, burns with a fire that is simultaneously the promise of transmutation and the risk of self-dispersion. Understanding and mastering this fire is the supreme task, the one that distinguishes king from slave, priest from fool, creator from devourer. Sexual energy, a lesson taught by the old adepts and veiled under 1,000 myths and taboos, is neither shame nor a pretext for pride for the magician, but raw material to be worked, directed, and transmuted according to the rhythm of the work and the mandate of the star. In nature, every birth is an explosion of polarities, Aditi Nut, phallus, sky, and earth. They seek each other, meet and dissolve, generating life, art, ecstasy, and power. Repression, disguised as virtue by the priests of fear, is the great enemy of gnosis. Sentimentalism, the bastard child of bourgeois morality and spiritual narcissism, is the abyss where energy, instead of rising, rots in dissatisfaction or dissipates in sterile fantasies. The magician must shed both unchecked bestiality and superstitious chastity, learning the difficult art of conscious management, letting desire run its course without falling into the servitude of reaction, transforming impulse into act, act into symbol, symbol into vehicle of power. Only then does sex cease to be slavery and becomes a royal tool, a means of expansion, not self-perpetuation. Practice begins with breathing exercises to redirect impulse at the onset of desire. The operator halts all automatism, assumes a posture of stillness, and channels the heat to the desired center, whether heart, solar plexus, or brow, through visualization and breath control. This simple act interrupts the chain of reflexes and allows energy to extend, multiply, and redistribute. It is not a question of denying the body or sublimating, as moralists preach, but of converting desire into useful currency, not thoughtless expenditure. Strategic chastity, imposed in periods according to the phase of the work, is a powerful tool. In the days preceding a major ritual, retention raises pressure and accumulates reserves. In moments of imbalance or confusion, deliberate release in pleasure clears obstacles and restores flow. No rule is absolute. The magician governs by experience and record, not dogma or neurosis. The virtue of silence is paramount in the administration of sexual fire. Exhibitionism, verbosity, and boasting of intimate acts destroy the force before it can be employed. The magician operates in secret, consecrates in secret, and gives thanks in secret. Vigils of silence before and after sexual acts fix the energy and protect it from the wear of chatter and projection. Recording states, sensations before, during, and after the act, thoughts, dreams, and synchronizations, is the true measure of the effect achieved. Experience replaces theory, and each body, partner, and situation becomes a unique laboratory. Agreements of intimacy, limits, and consent are magical conditions, not mere moral clauses. Alliance with other beings, ceremony, declared pact, protected space, explicit agreement on the aims and manner of union, follows the law of love under will. No coercion, no blackmail, no manipulation. Each is king and queen in their own circle. The encounter is a communion of freedoms, not invasion or subjugation. A brief ritual of gratitude after the act, a whisper, a glance, a touch, a shared prayer, raises and seals the current, preventing pleasure from dissolving into guilt or stagnation. The texts of Dino Oxide magic provide countless passages on the ethics and technique of sexual energy use. The operator studies, compares, experiments, but never imitates without discernment. Every prayer, every invocation of devotion is valid if it aligns vibration and orders intention. The bell, used to open and close rites, marks the threshold between the profane and the sacred, between dispersion and concentration, expectation and action. Meticulous but non-obsessive recording of states allows the magician to discern patterns, correct excesses, and discover affinities and dangers. The greatest danger, we repeat, is sentimentalism, equating sex with begging for love, using the body as currency for approval or belonging. Here lies the abyss in which the profane will founder. Whoever confuses energy expansion with emotional dependence, seeking confirmation of their value in another, will never know freedom, never complete the work. The magician loves without possessing, enjoys without begging, offers without expecting reward. The body is temple and laboratory, never prison or marketplace. Repression, conversely, breeds monsters: anxiety, neurosis, obsession, lies, fragmentation of being. The magician learns to listen to, honor, and govern desire. He never denies or demonizes it. Mastery is not negation but guidance. Adithinut is not hidden from Nuip. It is traversed, fertilized, and adored. Wisely employed sexual energy becomes a multiplying force of will, a spring of inspiration, medicine for body and soul. Wasted or repressed, it brings illness, melancholy, and defeat. The initiate who understands this fears neither pleasure nor abstinence, for both are instruments, never ends. Freedom consists in choosing and executing according to the star, not submitting to external precepts. Here lies the great teaching. The fire of the body is the magician's gold. Guard it, direct it, transmute it, silence the voices of guilt and pride. Honor your partner as a god or goddess. Record with honesty and discretion. Thus energy extends. Desire becomes light, and will burning on its own altar illuminates both inner and outer realms. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Chapter 10. War and Protection, Defense, Cutting, and Restoration. Those who aspire to execute their will in the world will inevitably be cast onto the battlefield, where visible and invisible forces seek to drain, corrupt, or sabotage the energy destined for the fulfillment of their law. In this perpetual war, more intimate than public, more subtle than bloody, defense is a principle of hygiene, not paranoia. It is not about living in the tremor of fear or fostering superstition of constant attack, but about assuming the imperial responsibility of keeping the inner kingdom pure, orderly, and free from infiltrations that do not serve the design of the star. Defense, understood as a major art, is the shield and spear of the initiate. It is the technique by which the integrity of the temple is preserved, what does not serve is cut, and order is restored after every clash, loss, or illness. The first duty is to identify drains, people, habits, places, thoughts, external rituals, or inherited customs that sap vitality and sow discord in the soul. The magician blames neither the world nor fate. They observe, record, and diagnose with the objectivity of an anatomist. Who is stealing your energy? Which conversation? Which habit? Which space leaves you drained, scattered, empty? Each drain is recorded, each leak analyzed. Here, there is no sentimentalism, only rigor. Recognition of the enemy is half the victory, but laziness and denial perpetuate servitude. The magician tolerates no vampires, negotiates with no parasites, sacrifices no power for misunderstood compassion. The law is, what does not serve the will shall be expelled or transformed. Drawing boundaries is the governing act of protection. A magical circle performed daily or weekly, depending on the intensity of the battle, is not mere superstition, but affirmation of sacred territory. The star ruby ritual, with its sequence of pentagrams and vibrations, cleanses the space and asserts the operator's authority. Taratrazo expels the superfluous. Every word traces a boundary between the self and chaos. Star Sapphira, a hexagrammatic form of greater reach, seals the space on subtler planes, shielding access to external forces and ordering internal ones within the hierarchy of the will. Preserved salt and lustral water are indispensable tools. A pinch of salt at the entrance of the home, water sprinkled in the corners, solar incense at thresholds, these suffice to remind the subconscious that the kingdom is protected, that no shadow crosses without permission. The cleansing of residues is law. every visitor, every object received, every recurring thought not belonging to the circle of the will must be examined and, if necessary, expelled through Vanasin. The magician reviews the circle as a priest reviews the altar. Nothing foreign, nothing impure, nothing confused. When a major event, illness, loss, betrayal, accident breaks equilibrium, the cutting ritual is required. A symbolic witness, a rope, garment, card or hair, representing the bond to be broken, is used in a private ceremony, cut, burned or buried. Pronouncing the formula, "By the law of my star, I cut every bond that no longer serves my will," the act is recorded, sealed with salt or fire, and followed by a period of silence and reconfiguration. Restoring the throne, dignity, health and energy after a shock is everyday art and supreme magic. Ritual alone is insufficient. The kingdom is rebuilt through conscious nourishment, restorative sleep, nourishing silence and regular physical exercise. The body is the first temple. Neglecting it is the first betrayal. The magician reorders their day, restructures their diet, recovers lost sleep, walks under the sun, breathes in silence. Every act, however trivial it seems, is consecration of prior royalty, eating without haste, sleeping without anxiety, moving with intention, speaking only when words serve order and not dispersion. Restoration of the throne is the most powerful medicine against melancholy and confusion. No exorcism replaces the basic hygiene of life. The use of protective talismans, preserved according to Saturn or Mars, depending on the nature of the danger or need for defense, strengthens the subtle field and anchors intention in matter. A talisman prepared at a propitious day and hour, anointed with oil, sealed with a word of power, and stored in a consecrated box, may be worn around the neck, in the hand, or installed in the workspace. The solar hymn recited every morning after the Vanasin ritual reinforces vibration, dispels shadows, and reminds the operator of the source of their authority. I am the Lord of the force of life. Here, magic is action, defense is affirmation, and protection is hygiene. The diary records every battle, every cleansing, every cut, every restoration. The magician learns from crises, reviews cycles, and refines strategy. Nothing is left to forgetfulness. Every clash is a lesson. Every attack is an opportunity for refinement. Fear is an enemy only when it paralyzes. In the hands of the wise, it transforms into vigilance, the art of war, lucidity without paranoia. War and protection are not paranoia. They are governance. The magician is neither martyr nor victim, but sovereign, choosing battles, cleansing the temple, cutting bonds without remorse, rebuilding the throne after every fall. In this way, they remain undefeated, not because nothing touches them, but because nothing diverts them from their orbit. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Chapter 11. Work in the world, labor, money, and community under law. Will, if legitimate and not a mere mirage of the ego, does not remain confined to the silence of meditation, nor dissolve in mystical abstractions. By its very nature, it seeks to unfold in action, to enter the field of work, the order of alliances, the architecture of community, and the circulation of wealth. Prosperity, then, is not spoils or a random reward, but the logical consequence of alignment between individual purpose and universal mechanics. Whoever chases gold out of anxiety or imitation only multiplies misery and servility. Whoever attracts it as an expression of the star sees in every coin, every work, every deal, a sacrament of power and service. The first task is to order time, which is the substance of work and the only truly irrecoverable material. The magician drafts an annual work plan, dividing days into consecrated hours, months into goals and milestones, and cycles into phases of expansion and retreat. There is no room here for lazy improvisation or self-destructive rigidity. The calendar is flexible but not chaotic, and each day begins with the reminder of the greater objective, attuned to the rhythm of the will. Alliances with partners, friends, and collaborators are chosen for vibratory affinity, not necessity or anxiety. Only what reinforces the star is admitted into the circle. Everything else is void, a drain and a source of conflict. The lesson is clear. A single loyal ally is worth more than 100 flatterers. A single task well executed is worth more than 1,000 scattered projects. Love under will is the law of all dealings. There is no firmness without courtesy, nor courtesy without limit. The magician in their work corrects both the civility of the beggar and the tyranny of the miser. They negotiate, pact, offer, and receive with the dignity of one who knows that nothing belongs to them, and everything is a loan from the star. If they give, it is to make room for more. If they receive, it is with gratitude as an opportunity to fulfill their work better. In every negotiation, whether salary, price, collaboration, or leadership, the formula is invariant. Do not beg, do not dominate, do not dilute personal law in the ocean of others' desires. Here, the magician becomes a social architect, shaping relationships and resources as the alchemist shapes raw matter. Practical application requires drafting the annual work plan by breaking projects into measurable goals, each accompanied by its launch ritual and evaluation protocol. Each month, the MAVO reviews progress, adjusts objectives, eliminates the superfluous, and reinforces the essential. Errors are not punished. Successes are not celebrated with intoxication. They record, correct, and continue. The launch ritual, the moment when a new work begins, is always marked by a consecration, choice of favorable planetary day and hour, CC Liber 777, blessing of tools, and invocation of the star. A solemn declaration of the goal is made before the altar of will. In group dealings, protocols of speech and silence are instituted. Not every meeting is productive, not every debate fruitful, not every criticism useful. A group under law is governed by turn of speech, attentive listening without interruption and closure of discussion when dispersion threatens the goal. Silence here is not absence, but a container for potency. Words are not mere noise, but the edge of action. Every voice rises to serve the plan, not to feed confusion or ego struggles. Thus, even in community, the magician remains king in their own realm and contributes without being lost in the mass. In this order, money ceases to be a feared ghost or golden fetish. It is an instrument, a fluid, a channel of the will. The tithe box ritual of giving a tenth to make room for more is not superstition, but acknowledgement of the law of exchange, a remedy against attachment and greed. What is given is liberated. What is retained without cause decays. Wealth, large or small, only serves if it circulates according to law. Everything else is a curse disguised as reward. Oracles employed in evaluation phases serve to validate stages, adjust direction, and anticipate resistance. They are not consulted out of fear or superstition, but out of rigor and humility before the complexity of destiny. Every relevant decision is recorded, every crisis analyzed in light of the magical diary, every success celebrated with gratitude and cinephoria. The consecration of tools and the inauguration of works follow the planetary calendar and the logic of correspondences. Mercury for word and commerce, Mars for battle and conquest, Venus for alliance and pleasure, Saturn for defense and consolidation, Jupiter for expansion and prosperity, the Sun for illumination and leadership, the Moon for intuition, and the germination of new works. Precision of timing is key. Every act ritualizes time. Every inauguration stamps energy. Every closure honors the cycle completed. Work in the world is finally the art of deploying will in all realms, not only in meditation or ecstasy, but in workmanship, agreements, community building, and the circulation of power and matter. Only thus does the law of Thelema fulfill its promise. It does not enclose, restrict, or dissolve, but multiplies, fertilizes, orders, and consecrates every corner of daily life. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Chapter 12. Trial, Hordalia, and Triumph, the unbreakable will. True progress on the path of will is always met by the universe with the appearance of trials and Hordalias, those crises that forge the magician's determination and separate genuine purpose from frivolous aspiration. Every step of ascent inevitably summons obstacles proportional to the magnitude of the transformation attempted, not by cosmic whim, nor the cruelty of the gods, but by the hidden law that dictates that gold separates from dross only under the crucible. The sword is tempered in the lash of flame, and metal acquires dignity only through the violence of the hammer. The trial, therefore, is a sign of advancement, not of condemnation. Its presence confirms that the chosen path is real and not a mere simulation. The first task is to learn to read these trials, to distinguish between those that are simple corrections of the path, adjustments, growing pains, inevitable resistances, and those that are temptations to deviate, attempts by the lower self or external forces to divert the operator from the orbit of their star. A legitimate trial reveals, behind the pain, an expansion of consciousness, a gain in clarity, or a purification of unredeemed residues. Deviation, by contrast, produces dispersion, self-deception, feelings of internal betrayal and exile from one's own dignity. The Mavo must record each crisis, analyze its roots, and determine whether the resistance reveals a limitation to overcome or is an unmistakable sign that the goal has lost its legitimacy. Not every failure is condemnation. Not every obstacle is an invitation to abandon the path. The metallurgy of will demands that every defeat become a laboratory of law, extracting from the fire of the fall not excuses or justifications, but principles, techniques, and verifiable teachings. The three-act crisis protocol is the operative technique for passing through Hordalia without shipwreck. Act 1. Halt. Interrupt all action, silence the tumult of automatic reaction, suspend judgment and activity until the tide of emotion subsides. Here, the perpetual lamp, the working candle that burns in the temple, witness of commitment, symbol of continuity beyond the fluctuation of states, serves as a reminder of the permanence of will. Act 2. Purify. Cleanse the space, perform a ritual bath, recite psalms or hymns for strength, use salt and lustral water to dissolve residual energies, restore the axis, and prepare the field for reflection. Act 3. Reconsecrate. Renew the oath of the work, reaffirm the commitment between invisible powers and one's own consciousness, declare aloud the will to pass through the crisis, and transform the fall into a platform for ascent. The renewal of oath ritual is solemn and severe. The operator reviews the original text of their vow, examines achievements and failures, and confesses in their diary the attachments and resistances that survive. If the oath has been betrayed, it is reformed and strengthened. If fulfilled, it is elevated to a higher octave. The audit of attachments is an exercise in autopsy. Every habit, relationship, idea, or possession that remains out of fear rather than alignment with will is enumerated. This record is not punishment or self-flagellation, but an X-ray preceding surgery. Only those who know themselves in their most brutal truth can choose detachment, inconsequence, and true advance. The lessons of the crisis are fixed in a table of extracted laws and behavioral changes. Each trial leaves a law, a formula, a warning. The magician does not repeat errors from ignorance, but only when the lesson must incarnate in the body and not just the mind. This table, reviewed month by month, year by year, becomes a book of power. There is no progress without memory, no triumph without recording defeats and victories. Thus, self-deception is eliminated, character is reinforced, and the will becomes unbreakable. The supreme model of this experience is found in Division and the Voice, where the traversal of the airs, the crossing of veils, and the conquest of each higher degree is always accompanied by trials, monstrous apparitions, temptations, and voices of doubt and fear. The initiate neither avoids nor dramatizes them, nor seeks to overcome them by brute force. They pass through with serenity, record the experience, learn from the Hordalia, and continue. Serenity is the ultimate crown, not noisy victory or the applause of others, but mastery that no longer needs to dazzle or justify itself. It is the calm of the sleeping lion, the stillness of the star in its orbit, governance without violence, authority independent of reaction, and rooted in permanence at the center. The magic of the trial is to transform failure into power, the wound into knowledge, the fall into momentum. There is no room here for lamentation or self-indulgence. Only the magician who knows how to lose with dignity deserves to triumph without stain. Crisis protocol is medicine. The audit of attachments is surgery. The table of lessons is alchemy. Everything is consecrated to will. Everything is ordered under the law of learning. In this way, unbreakability is achieved, not through the absence of crises, but through the transfiguration of obstacles into vehicles, enemies into teachers, and pain into cornerstone. Those who persevere in this art no longer fear the trial, no longer anguish over the Hordalia, nor are intoxicated by triumph. They know the rhythm, anticipate crises, learn from the fall, and rise without dramatics. Victory is silence. The crown is serenity. Mastery is internal law, not external spectacle. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.